One of the most confusing experiences in relationships is this: the closer you get, the more they pull away. At first, everything seems aligned. Interest is mutual. Communication flows. There is emotional openness. And then, just as closeness increases, something shifts. Distance appears. Messages shorten. Energy changes. And you're left wondering what went wrong. Most people interpret this as rejection. Or worse, they assume they did something wrong. But pulling away when someone gets closer is rarely about dislike. It is almost always about psychological threat. Closeness activates the deepest parts of the human mind. It exposes attachment patterns, unresolved fears, and internal conflicts that most people are not consciously aware of. When closeness increases, the nervous system reacts before logic does. For some people, closeness feels safe. For others, it feels dangerous. The moment someone pulls away is often the moment intimacy crosses an internal threshold. A threshold where emotional exposure becomes unavoidable. And for people who associate intimacy with loss of control, vulnerability, or past pain, distance becomes a form of self-protection. This reaction is not planned. It is automatic. One of the primary reasons people pull away is fear of emotional engulfment. This is the fear of losing autonomy inside a relationship. When closeness increases, they subconsciously feel their independence is being threatened. Not because you are controlling, but because intimacy activates an old internal narrative that closeness equals restriction. These individuals often value independence strongly. They define themselves through autonomy, self-reliance, and emotional self-containment. When someone gets closer, it creates internal tension. Part of them wants connection. Another part fears losing themselves. Pulling away temporarily relieves that tension. Another key reason people withdraw is unresolved attachment trauma. If someone learned early in life that closeness leads to pain, abandonment, or emotional unpredictability, intimacy becomes associated with danger. When emotional connection deepens, the body reacts with anxiety. In these cases, distance is not rejection. It is regulation. Creating space helps their nervous system calm down. The problem is that this withdrawal is rarely communicated clearly. Instead of saying, "I feel overwhelmed," people disengage. They respond less. They create emotional distance. And the other person feels confused. Another critical factor is emotional asymmetry. When one person becomes emotionally invested faster or deeper than the other, it creates imbalance. The less invested person may begin to feel pressure, not because the closeness is wrong, but because the pace feels mismatched. Pressure, even subtle pressure, kills safety. And safety is essential for intimacy. This is why people sometimes pull away right after meaningful moments, deep conversations, emotional confessions, or increased vulnerability. Those moments increase emotional stakes. And increased stakes activate fear in people who are not ready to hold them. Another overlooked reason people pull away is loss of internal tension. Early connection thrives on curiosity, uncertainty, and emotional movement. As closeness increases, uncertainty decreases. For some individuals, that decrease feels like a loss of stimulation. Instead of leaning into depth, they seek distance to recreate emotional tension. This is not always conscious. It is a learned emotional pattern. People who are used to intensity often mistake calm intimacy for boredom. And boredom triggers withdrawal. There is also an identity component. When someone gets closer, it often requires integration into daily life, priorities, and emotional space. For people who have not developed a stable sense of self, this feels threatening. They fear being defined by the relationship. Pulling away allows them to reassert identity. Another important element is emotional responsibility. Closeness increases emotional responsibility. It means being present, consistent, and emotionally available. For people who are not emotionally equipped to do this, withdrawal becomes an escape. They may like you. They may even want the connection. But they do not feel capable of sustaining the emotional demands of closeness. This creates a push-pull dynamic. They approach when distance feels safe. They withdraw when closeness feels overwhelming. One of the most damaging responses to this dynamic is chasing. When someone pulls away, the instinct is to close the gap, to ask questions, seek reassurance, or increase effort. Unfortunately, this often reinforces the fear that caused the withdrawal in the first place. Chasing communicates urgency. Urgency communicates emotional dependence. And emotional dependence increases pressure. Pressure does not bring someone closer. It pushes them further away. Another reason people pull away is emotional incongruence. When your words, actions, and emotional state are not aligned, the other person senses instability. Even if they cannot articulate it, their nervous system reacts. Closeness requires trust. Trust requires emotional consistency. Without it, intimacy feels unsafe. There is also a biological layer to this behavior. Closeness increases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. For securely attached individuals, this feels calming. For avoidant or trauma-affected individuals, oxytocin can increase anxiety. The same chemical that bonds one person can overwhelm another. This explains why some people feel the urge to create distance right after intimacy. Their body is reacting, not their mind. Another painful truth is that some people pull away because closeness exposes incompatibility. As connection deepens, differences become clearer. Values, emotional needs, and long-term expectations start to surface. When these differences feel threatening, withdrawal feels easier than confrontation. Avoidance often feels safer than honesty. It is also important to understand that pulling away does not always mean the connection is doomed. It means the person is managing internal conflict. The outcome depends on awareness, communication, and emotional maturity. However, many people never resolve this pattern. They repeat it across relationships. Getting close triggers withdrawal. Distance restores comfort. And intimacy never stabilizes. For the person on the receiving end, this dynamic is exhausting. It creates confusion, self-doubt, and emotional instability. The hardest part is not the distance itself, it's the inconsistency. One day, closeness feels welcomed. The next, it feels punished. The most important thing to understand is this: you cannot fix someone's fear of intimacy by proving your worth. You cannot love someone into emotional readiness. The more you try, the more pressure you create. The healthiest response to withdrawal is emotional grounding. Not retreating out of fear. Not chasing out of anxiety. But stabilizing yourself. Closeness should feel mutual. If you are the only one holding the emotional weight, the dynamic becomes unsustainable. Sometimes, pulling away is a signal that the connection has reached the limit of that person's emotional capacity. And recognizing that early can save you from prolonged confusion. If someone consistently pulls away when things get closer, it does not mean you are too much. It means closeness activates something they have not resolved. Understanding this shifts the focus away from self-blame. And self-blame is what keeps people trapped in unhealthy dynamics. Closeness should not feel like a risk you pay for alone. It should be shared. And when someone cannot meet you there, the most powerful thing you can do is stop abandoning yourself to keep them comfortable. Because real intimacy begins when both people are willing to stay present, not when one keeps disappearing.